Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Kemlane. Our next guests are the director and star of the fantastic new film, Afterclass. In it, Justin Long plays a creative writing professor navigating the prickly world of sexual, gender, and race politics in his classroom, while also dealing with his family in the midst of a crisis. Let's take a look at Afterclass.
Thanks for coming in.
What's going on?
Josh, you pressured a student to reveal an intimate moment in front of an entire classroom.
You really want me to say?
Yes! We're writers. Embarrass yourselves.
We're gonna need you to take some time off.
Hey, Grandma. You look so much better.
She looks hot.
Mom's cleaning out her apartment. It's very confusing.
I'm gonna get rid of it.
Grandma's still alive.
I don't want to live anymore.
I need my grandma. You're like my best friend.
I want to be in heaven.
All right, give me the pillow.
Please.
You're gonna be with Grandpa very soon. Here we go. It's
Josh, what are you doing?
Nothing. I was just fluffing the pillows.
I want to talk about your gorgeous immigrant.
Well, I just wonder if we could be a little bit more intimate. If there's a way to incorporate just a little affection.
I don't know about that.
Okay, well, we're basically on the same page.
Hello.
Hey, Grandma.
Everything okay?
There's not much time.
Who's on the phone? Whose voice is this?
It's
But
me.
it's me.
Everything's a joke to you, isn't it?
It's no wonder you're in trouble with your school.
Think for a second, Josh.
They wanted us to talk about making this a safe space.
Could you stop recording me?
Why?
I'd like to make this a
Okay,
safe
so
space.
let's have a dialogue.
How much battery do you have?
Full.
Great.
That's not my mother. That's my freaking soulmate.
I thought Dad was your soulmate.
Shut up.
These kids hit the jackpot when they got you as a grandma.
You got an army of people who love you at your back.
Everybody, please welcome Justin Long and writer-director Dan Schechter. Let's hear it.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Guys, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on this phenomenal film, but also on being able to tell a story about something very topical and specific right now without ever annoying me. Is that like, I mean that as a highest compliment, but anytime...
It would look good on a poster. It didn't really annoy me.
I mean, almost any time that I am in a conversation about safe spaces, I'm in a conversation about what we can and cannot say, I always am just kind of like, just deal with it. Just deal with what you can and can't say, guys. It's not a big deal, you know? And I thought that your film, in some ways, kind of took that side while also telling the story. He is not the victim in this movie.
No, he's definitely not. And I think if we made a movie about Justin being a victim, then it probably would have annoyed many people.
Yeah.
I think that was something we wisely. But we were terrified it would not even just annoy people, but genuinely offend people. But I think that was kind of the good things about. People complain a lot about being in these times where, you know, oh, you have to be so paranoid about every little thing you say and tweet, but that made this movie better. We chased down every joke to make sure that it wasn't something that we wouldn't want to stand behind, you know, years later, and that the target of the joke was something that we felt was meaningful and relevant, but also I think the movie has teeth. I think when people watch it, that, you know, I've had friends who give me a compliment and say, that's kind of brave. And I think what they mean is, I think those things, and I would be a little afraid to put that in a movie, but somehow I don't think it offends anybody because it feels honest, I guess, and the target of it isn't any particular person. It's kind of everybody.
At no point do you become a huge defender of his position and where he's coming from. And in a sense, while wrong is too strong of a word, I would say, which is probably what is the most brave thing about the film, is that it doesn't want anyone to actually be wrong. There is a position or a thing that he has to do to make things right, that he has to come to terms with.
It's also got empathy for its characters, so it's not judging them as much as it maybe could. And it's funny that you introduced it that way, because we've done some interviews for it. One in particular, I'm thinking, where the interviewer said, I hated you. She made it very clear that she didn't like my character going in. She had made preconceived, which is totally fun, which is what's interesting about a movie like this. And then she, grew to, she had her own journey with the movie as a result of that. But it depends on the viewer. You know, it's sort of open. Dan has made it very vague enough that it's open to the viewer's interpretation of events. That's a very vague answer.
You're also but you're also a very likable guy, Justin.
What is that supposed to mean, Ricky?
I think as a person and as a performer, like you on screen is very quickly, it's like, this guy is likable. And even in the opening scene where you are crossing a line in some way, I, at the very least, I didn't side with you necessarily, but I was like, his intentions are pure here. He's just a little wrong.
Well, he's a creative writing teacher, and so he's trying to extract this story from one of his students, and he pushes her maybe too aggressively to reveal an intimate detail about her life, and that triggers somebody else in the classroom. So that's what Ricky's talking about. And so, I was technically, the character's doing his job in trying to get the story out of this student, but then that's the jumping off point for the movie. Did he go too far? What is too far? What does that mean? Yeah.
We intentionally tried to choose, for people who are here or at home, just to be clear that he does something that is very borderline controversial at the beginning of the movie and then debated all throughout. We tried really hard to choose something that was just on the line. And I find taking like a random poll of people who I think are honest with me, half the people watch the movie at the beginning and have no issue with his behavior, and half the people watch it and it's hard for them to almost like start to like him again because that behavior made him so uncomfortable, and maybe by the end of the movie those people can see some nuanced point of view. That's all we're advocating for. I think that's why we're not offending people as much as we thought, because we're just saying, like, maybe don't take such an extreme position and just try to acknowledge that some of these situations are messy and maybe there's a humanity on both sides of it. But
well, I think nuance is a really important word, right? Because not just within the politics of the film, but within the emotional dynamics of the scenes involving his family, you search for nuance in every scene. At no point, there's a lot of movies that people try to make about humans interacting and searching for connection, and oftentimes they fall into traps because narrative movies have to go to a certain place and they can lose nuance. Whereas I felt like your scenes where someone else would fall in that trap, you search for nuance and you search for an honesty within those moments that can be very hard to come across. It takes a lot more work than I think people give credit for.
Yeah, it's helpful. Thanks, pals. It's helpful that the movie is based on experiences I had as a teacher with my family, and then there's a lot of fiction thrown into the movie, and hopefully you can't tell which is which, but life tends to have more nuance in it than movies, and so that being the inspiration, I think, helped make it feel pretty grounded and identifiable to your average person going in. And we played it all over the world, all over the country, and we tend to get the same reaction almost at every Q&A. So, and we're really excited for it to come out Friday and to see like what the world thinks, and maybe on Twitter we'll see some angry thing that may even be valid that was in our blind spot. So I'm kind of fascinated to see how people respond to it.
When you are doing these scenes with nuance, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in the family dynamic, how many different options are you searching for as an actor, or do you generally have a pretty clear idea as to how you want to play the scene?
No. Do I have a clear idea? I just try to be as present as possible and trust the script and try to give myself over to the story. I just try to be as present as possible. And Dan was very good about, making certain adjustments. He knew the story better. It was so personal to him, so he knew it better than anyone. So therefore, I trusted him with shaping it. And all the other actors they're so good. And they all, it's hard not to be present when you're talking to Kate Berlan or Fran or Richard.
Consummately present person.
So present, yeah. So it was, we made some adjustments, but it was more about just listening and, the typical actor stuff.
When you go into scenes like this, do you try to shoot lots of variations to bring it to the edit room?
Yeah, we were talking about the opening scene, this controversial scene, or the one that's at least discussed for the rest of the movie, and that was a scene where we didn't know exactly what the tone was, so let's get more extreme pressury options, let's get more like he's letting her come to her own conclusion about what she wants to say. And then throughout the rest of the movie, everybody on that poster and in the movie, they're really funny, and they're good at improv, and I have no ego, particularly if somebody can improvise something better on the spot than I was able to write within 2 years of working on the screenplay. And Justin's really funny, I think thrives on sort of spontaneity, and you want the movie to feel natural, and sometimes letting actors go, you know, take the dialogue and make it more comfortable in their own mouth is fine by me if it works.
And the low-budget nature of the movie also lent itself to that, because we had to sometimes shoot some of these scenes on the fly. We couldn't lock down streets. We're in New York, as you know, people walking by, and so we had to discover things more organically. We couldn't shoot as much coverage, which I kind of like. It lends itself to a more natural feel.
I do too. I mean, I won't use this movie's name, but earlier this year, a New York movie came out that I had at least double the budget of yours. I would say quadruple the budget of yours.
Spider-Man.
They could,
He's referencing.
they could lock down the streets, and I thought it looked I thought it looked horrible. I thought it just looked like a TV show. It made New York City look like a vestibule of the vestibule of a bank, and I just couldn't stand it. With this, having to lock down like a single shot or like less coverage makes it more cinematic to me, and makes it feel like it's there's more craft involved, because you actually have to make clear decisions about what you're shooting.
Yeah.
I think those big budget movies now, I don't know how much emphasis they give to the background actors. I think they're trying to cut corners and save money. So like you said, you can tell, but I sometimes notice movies like I was watching Tootsie the other day for the 200th time, and there's some great New York shots where he's walking down the street, and it's filled with people and life, and the original Superman movies, the Richard Donner movies are like that. The background actors are so good and believable, and they're just on their, you know. But you don't see as much. I noticed that these days. So we had actual people.
Yeah, but that's
people going by.
Long lenses and just people running around and not knowing.
We're also romanticizing it. It is a bit hellish, especially for Justin, who has to stay focused. And, you know, he didn't have a lot of "hey, I'm walking here" moments where a cab happened to be going by and we got something spectacular. It's more like somebody would ruin a take, look at the camera, want a selfie with him while we're trying to shoot and he's doing something emotional. So
Doing a moving selfie.
yeah, the movie was a pain in the ass. We shot it in 16 days. We had no money, and as a filmmaker, you're sort of proud to say it, but you stand on the shoulder of cast and crew who had to suffer through it sometimes more. But also then there's the fun for an actor like Justin, where it's both hard to do like 8 pages of dialogue a day, but also he's not sitting in a trailer for hours. He gets constant action. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that said, the movie, I think, looks better because of the decisions that you had to make with that limited budget.
I agree, yeah. And it's, again, yeah, there were frustrating moments like that with people going by, because New Yorkers don't like to be told, you can't use this sidewalk. Would you mind? And we had great PAs, we had a great crew, but you know, there's only so much you can say to somebody on their way to work or living their life. Can you go across the street and use the other side? But anywhere else in the country, it becomes like, oh, cool, you're making a movie, and oh yeah, sure. What do you need from me? New York, it's like, I don't. You can't curse on this, right? Good. Yeah, you can. Oh, you can? Yeah. Well, it's too late. The moment passed.
Do it.
I was going to say, I don't.
No, that's 100% true. I have friends who make films. I interview filmmakers all day. I love movies. And when someone is shooting on my block and they're like, could you hold on? I'm like, no, I have to go to my home. Yeah. Get out. I'm good. Yeah. That's my home. I get really mad at like a 19-year-old PA who's just like, there's a really mad guy here. Can someone come help me?
The trick was to shoot all around my neighborhood, which isn't far from here. I live at 23rd and 1st. I won't give my exact address away.
Oh, it's okay.
Basically did.
Yeah.
But we shot in Essa Bagel, which is my bagel place. We shot in Orion Diner, which is a diner I go to, and now they treat me like Martin Scorsese when I come in now. Oh, really? It's very sweet. Please, sir, right this way. They make other people get up. No. So
was that? I mean, the limited budget that you have, is that the lowest that you've worked with before?
No, I did a movie for like 65 grand called Supporting Characters, which I wish I could say looked way cheaper than this, but there's sort of a different mentality when you work under 100,000, where everyone's kind of happy just to work for free and you're stealing whatever. And this, you're sort of having to pay people and pay actors and pay for locations, and it somehow you're not getting 10 times as much out of it, but. They're all pretty miserable, especially for the director. I wasn't a jerk on set, but anything, but I was probably a stressed person that wasn't a wonderful energy to be around, because you feel like you have a gun to your head and you have to get it right. And Justin and Kate are being hilarious, and like the kids, and I'm being like, shut up.
That is not to the kids.
No,
that's not true. Dan.
I was just yelling at children all day. I was so mad.
The fun thing with the kids was that they were Dan's nieces, and they were really sweet. But they didn't have a lot of experience on, if any, on camera, and so we would we started kind of tricking them and just talking to them, because when they before Dan called action, they were great, and we were joking around, and they were so natural. And then action, they would kind of seize up, and tense up. And so we started kind of winking at the camera guys, and we were all in on it together. We'd be rolling and just kind of riffing with the girls, and they were totally unaware that they were being filmed. And then we tried to sneak in some of the dialogue from the movie, from the scene.
Yeah,
it was really fun, and they ended up being they're great.
And I think besides the fact they're my nieces, they are actually really good in the movie. But it's another benefit of a low budget thing where you have total creative control. Is I didn't need some studio to go, I don't think these two kids are good enough, and I was able to put them in the movie. And it's enormously pleasurable to have that timestamp for me and my family of them at that age, and me being an uncle with them. And Justin also lives the uncle life, and it's this special, specific dynamic you have with kids where it's kind of all fun and no real responsibility.
All the good stuff, but no changing diapers.
I'm curious. I don't want to harp on the budget thing too much, but I am curious because one of the things that I liked about the film is that oftentimes when something is a low budget and it is just about people connecting and talking, you can get a sense of how that budget was used very easily. It's like, oh, that actor was there for 2 days, one location. There's maybe 3 more locations entirely in the movie. I see how this money was spent. I actually couldn't see that with a lot of the film. You have a full, beautiful cast. You have multiple locations. You're on the street on a regular basis. So was that something that you intentionally thought about? That you were like, I do not want this to feel or look like we could only afford these 2 or 3 things. I
don't like to be coy about the budget because I always want to know what people's budgets are. So the budget of this was roughly around $500,000. I never see the benefit of not telling people.
I was paid $450,000.
That's correct.
So it was really only a $50,000.
But because I'm also an educator. I'm a professor, so I like to let people know what it costs and where the money goes. But it was hard to say. Sometimes it's just feeding your crew well. But New York City has a production value, so you want to have locations so that diner, for example, you're seeing outside the windows. It's big. I go there every day or every other day probably as a customer, so I knew that they would help me out. Or you have a friend who has what do you call those, like apartments that are for show?
Apartments for show.
Model apartment?
I never think of words. Model apartment, but I'm like,
AFSs.
Nobody's living there. Maybe we can shoot in that. So you just kind of, even though you have money, you're still just desperately, even a hospital is an enormously expensive location. And our producer, Courtney Johnson, managed to, smooth talk the person with who was able to turn the faucet on. And we got it for probably, I would say literally like a tenth of what like a Law and Order would pay, because I really believe in the power of people passionately, scrappily pitching their thing. But in New York, people are pretty jaded because they get offered a lot of stuff and they don't really care. But you can still make stuff happen, I think.
Kate and I had done a take that we were really proud of. It was just an improv take, and Dan wanted us just walking and talking and laughing, whatever. And so it was, there was a Steadicam guy in front of us following us, and we were walking around a couple blocks, and Kate and I we were telling a story to each other, and we were just laughing, and it was just like it just felt good, and we were connected and laughing, and I turned around at the end of the take, and the camera guys, I was like, oh yeah, and they were like, they seemed disappointed, and I said, what was that not good? They were like, no, there was, and I kind of saw a lady leave the frame behind us at the very last minute. And I said, oh, did she ruin the very end? But that's okay. We got the rest of it, right? And they said, no. She was walking with us, behind us, the entire time, like making faces and going, in the shot. And for no other reason but to, like, be shitty, again, we have to have
I think we use it. I think it's in the movie, and we punched in a little bit, what you can do now, and we cut out right before her big moment. But
so like, why would you do that? It was such a...
Well, people don't know. I mean, as much as they hear that movies cost money and all this, they don't know that specific moment, ruining the take, is actually setting money on fire for everybody who's there working.
Right, or a good performance, or, they probably think it's like CNN, and it's like, oh, hey, Mom, like, But yeah, it was awful. She was a monster.
She was like, and she started yelling. She was like, "That'll learn you to not shoot in my neighborhood." Really? Yeah, it was that kind of energy. It's weird. Yeah.
She seemed more joyous than that. I don't know. I think she was having fun. Yeah, I don't think
I was projecting my own.
Yeah, it's all good.
Justin,
ruined my take.
When what was it that made you sign on to the film? Was it the script right away, or did you read the script and then meet Dan and feel like this is a person that you wanna do this project with?
We were actually. It was recommended to me from a mutual friend of ours named Doug Benson. Shout out to Doug. We were just at a show last night. Doug loves movies. It's really good. And Doug is somebody who knows movies really well. He's just like a big fan of movies, and so I immediately, it piqued my interest because I just trust Doug and trust his taste, and I love the script. I just felt like the script. Usually, within a couple pages, and it's usually just it's something as simple as the dialogue doesn't flow. It just doesn't sit right in the mouth, and it's not natural. And Dan's dialogue was very natural, organic, and I'm very close with my own grandmother. In fact, she was just on my podcast. Life is short, no, double plug. And she's 102, and so we've, I think about her death and been bracing for that for a while, and so that element of the story, which we haven't really talked about, but it's a backdrop to the story, is that his grandmother, played by Lynn Cohen, is dying, and the whole family is kind of preparing for her death, and so that really touched me, and I felt connected to that, and it was something I wanted to explore.
What is your podcast?
It's called Life. I'm so glad you asked. It's called Life is Short. Thanks, Ricky. It's called Life is Short. You can find it on kind of anywhere. Podcast.
Life is short. Is it about? I mean, you had your 102-year-old grandmother on. Is it about life?
That's a good question. No, it's more about
impending death.
All people who are about to die.
About mortality.
Yeah, it's very morbid. No, it's well, that episode should have been called Life is Long, because we usually don't have guests that are over I would say 95. Most of our guests are 95 to 100. No, it's an interview show, and it was more for the pun. Life is Short with Justin Long, because I just thought it was hilarious, the pun. And but we usually have actors what better known than my grandmother. Although now she's well known, but
really huge guests like Jonah Hill and Bill Burr and amazing people. Yeah. This was one-off with your grandma.
Exactly. Thanks, Dan. I felt douchey for me to say that. We got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this week we've had really good Neil Patrick Harris and Olivia Wilde, and so it's been really fun. I do it with my brother. Fun.
It's also why I complimented that I love this show so much. It's nice to have a long-form chat, especially when we're talking about even on something like this movie, where it's just tricky and 2 minutes to really explain what it is.
Sound bites.
Yeah.
If you explain this movie in sound bites, you are gonna either turn people off, or people are gonna watch it and expect to get angry about it, because this movie is about the nuance, and it is about the long-winded nature of these conversations and the life that this guy leads. I'm curious, how did you, when you were setting about to write the script, it feels in some ways like while it's all connected to this main character, these different aspects of his life are disconnected, yet you somehow bring them all together within the same themes. How did you find that while you were writing the script? How did you know that the school stuff would relate to the grandmother stuff and to the girlfriend stuff?
Yeah, it's a weird follow your instincts kind of thing. If Justin's making a movie now, and we were talking the other day, sometimes that song is going to mean more to you when you're making this movie. There are things that start to stick, and then there are things that fall off. But I was teaching at the time, and I was having a really interesting experience with students who were, to be kind, just really experimenting with activism while Black Lives Matter was happening and Trump was running and Me Too. And it was a thrilling time, it was an eye-opening time, and it was a terrifying kind of time to teach and to feel comfortable speaking freely. And I think the students kind of went in looking for any opportunity to find something that was, offending them or upsetting them. And I can even now feel that starting to cool down just a little bit. But I think I was teaching at the peak of it, and I would tell stories to my friends and family, and I realized I was on the front lines of something, as if I came back from Afghanistan, you guys aren't going to believe this. It's kind of crazy in there. But I noticed my own defensiveness and my own sort of, I don't know, behavior I wasn't particularly proud of, and I wanted to try to point out both. And then around the same time, my grandma, went into a hospital and passed away, and we had 8 really potent days with her where she was lucid, and we had sort of gallows humor laughter, and it was a real circle of life thing. And I don't know, I guess I started thinking a lot about generations, what she went through in her life, and then my mom, and then the Kate Berlant character, and then the students, and then my nieces, and you start to think that, what is that, the long arc of time bends towards justice, even if it goes slowly. There was a lot of that was percolating in my mind.
Do you ever worry? I mean, telling the story about, for lack of a better word, safe spaces and colleges. Did you ever worry about who could co-opt that idea in that story, since anytime it feels like that conversation is happening, you get a Donald Trump Jr. book called Triggered, or you get a Corolla movie called Safe Spaces.
Yeah, I went into this job rolling my eyes a lot more at safe spaces and trigger warnings. I think I had the cliche reaction of, hey, kids, you can't make the world a safe space and colleges to be challenging. And that's definitely true, and I certainly haven't wildly changed my mind. But, you know, I remember one time I saw a student be triggered by a film that was played, and it made me just have more nuanced opinion about that, about even just the Me Too movement, which I think is the most important revolutionary in my lifetime, just makes you go, I don't think it's a bad idea to err on the side of maybe being a bit more protective of people than we used to, and that feels nice when you start to do it. And the movie doesn't really weigh in one way or the other, except to say, like, yeah, this guy can grow and he can make a decision that maybe he wouldn't have at the beginning of the film, but is it great for academia to now start to let the students decide what is discussed and played in a class? I don't know what the answer to that is, except I know that it's tricky and it's not helpful for people to be so certain on one side or the other.
But
I
that's
think it will start to
he becomes a
balance
better
out.
person.
Yes.
Right? In the same way that these movements, while any kind of movement, any kind of political movement or revolution has to swing very far one way and to have any sort of effect whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it may swing this far one way and everybody becomes a slightly better person because of it, and then it can kind of come back and do it again.
I believe that is what will happen over the. I think people are just so worried now it's going to keep trending in such an extreme direction, which, man, may be true. I don't know, but I bet in 10 years we have a better handle on how we address certain subjects. Even now on Netflix, you can see trigger warnings are starting to come up before shows and things like that. And I'm sure there are people who roll their eyes at it. And I don't know if it's the worst thing in the world to just try. You know, they didn't used to have ratings about every little thing that would come up before a TV show, and now they do. So, and you get used to it. So I wish I had a more definite position to leave an audience with, except that, yeah, let's all try to, you know, see the other side a little bit.
Well, it's appropriate for the movie, for this movie, because I think that's the position the movie takes, which is one of nuance, like you said, and it leaves it open to an audience's interpretation. People may walk away from the movie completely siding against the character or not thinking he learned enough or did enough. That's kind of what I like about it. And that's the only way to handle an issue like this, which is so fraught with nuance. And
we find more people who just get pissed at the kids too. There's a lot of sort of older white men who just get mad, and I would say every Q&A there's one guy, and if he doesn't raise his hand, he's in the audience, and I feel him. Or he comes up afterwards because he was afraid to say something in front of the entire class.
What does he say? What does he usually say?
He says, "Don't you think these kids are going a little too far?" Like, it's like that kind of attitude. And
you want to be like, yeah, they're kids.
And I feel like we joke about this all the time, that were you ever more certain about your opinions than when you were in college, right? Whatever movies you loved or TV shows you were, I mean, I guess I still have smugness about my opinions, but at that age, I was so definite. And like I said, to give them credit, I taught screenwriting at one point, and every black student I had was writing something about Black Lives Matter. It meant that much to them. And so they wanted to be part of the movement. They wanted to mirror these activists that they were seeing on TV who were making a real difference, who made a difference to me, and I got that. So there was a lot of good faith activism that I saw there too.
I think we have time for a couple questions from the audience. Who, right there.
Hi. As a writer who would like to write about tough topics that are personal, yet kind of scary to navigate, how do you as a writer go about doing that and tell yourself like to keep going and to keep writing even though there might be a consequence at the end of it?
That's a great question. This movie is obviously quite personal, and it's scary to write your own personal stuff, but it's also easier. You know, they say write what you know. So there's a huge advantage to already kind of having characters in your mind or your own voice that's very helpful. Justin's character, who's a creative writing teacher in the movie, has a speech that he partially improvised that's beautiful about embarrass yourself. Just people will admire you for it. I like that when I see movies. It makes me want to raise my game and be more honest in my work, and that's why I said I like that compliment if somebody says the movie seems brave to them. Or something. And the last thing is, sometimes you will write about people that you love and you care about, and you might write something that hurts their feelings. My ruthless advice is that's not something you can take into account. That's part of the job. But like with this film, I want to look at myself first. Sometimes, and I saw it with my students a lot, writing can be revenge on the guy who broke your heart or the parent who was not great for you. And I think it's wise to try to, like therapy, work on yourself first and then try to have some empathy for the people who have wounded you.
And I think to just lead with truth. I mean, you said it, lead with truth and your own truth. And you know, I was talking with my family about Huckleberry Finn the other day, and they said that the literary elite at the time were really shit all over Mark Twain for being so crass. They felt like that book was beneath a great literary mind because of the way he wrote character, the dialogue, the authentic dialogue of the time. And so, I talk about the pressure, like, so but my point is, if Mark Twain can do it, you can do it. But now, look, and he was chastised by some writers whose names we still know. So I think if you lead with truth and an ear for authenticity, can't go wrong.
Yeah, and turn off your Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
While writing?
Any writer will know that any distraction is just, no one picks up their phone faster, nobody has a cleaner apartment or cleaner dishes or laundry done than the writer.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, because, you screenwrite plenty. I'm sure you look, you have a writing partner too, which helps. Yeah,
we'll get on each other if we're slacking.
Yeah.
So I write with my brothers, yeah.
Next question.
Hey, so you've done like many comedic roles, and I know you've done SNL before, but have you ever considered having your own comedy sketch show?
What a great question. I love the way you asked it, the way you presented. That's very flattering of you to say. Just to ask. No, I've never considered that. I just got to do a little bit on SNL, a Matthew McConaughey impression, but I love SNL. I grew up watching, just idolizing those Dana Carvey and Mike Myers, and no, I'd love to be on it, but I've never considered having a sketch show. But I'm flattered by the question. I love doing characters. Thanks.
I said literally the other day that you could have been on SNL because you just have such a deep, well of characters that you can draw from that are nothing like the everyman Justin Long character that you see.
Oh, please.
All right.
Wait, that is true. You are often cast as like the everyman gateway into the movie, and you're very, very good at it. Do you ever go out for broader characters or more specific characters?
But then he has like Idiocracy and Zack and Miri, like these scene-stealing characters that I adore.
Yeah, I miss doing those. I used to do more, I guess. No, well, in fact, the next thing I have, it's a series on Netflix called Gary Haji. I play more of a very different character, the son of a gangster from Pittsburgh. So it was fun. I really miss, and when I do plays, I get to do kind of more different characters. But it's been a while. No, I'd like to do another one. I love doing those parts.
Do you feel like you exist in this place where you have to sort of prove to casting directors or other people that you can do that and that you do that often, just maybe not as much as they've seen you?
I've stopped thinking that way. There may have been a time where I was like, I gotta show, and you put together a reel of all the different roles, but I don't know why. I guess maybe apathy. I just don't care as much if people, want to cast me. No, I haven't. I guess I'm not as maybe ambitious as I was, so I don't feel the need to prove that. But that's also one of the fun things about doing the podcast. I get to do fun, I get to play around with different actors, and we do impressions and voices. And I love doing animated work because of that. I do a show called F is for Family on Netflix.
I love F is for Family. It's a great show.
Yeah, oh, thanks, Ricky. Back in the day doing King of the Hill. So that affords you the opportunity to do fun, like wildly different characters. There's a part I play on that, which is my favorite one, where he's called Roustabout. He's just like a circus roustabout, and I have maybe one line every 3 or 4 episodes, and I just love doing the voice.
And he kind of talks like this. He's like this kind of guy.
And it's really annoying. As you can say. Imagine that so I can only have one line every couple of episodes, but it's fun to do animation.
Right, if you do more than that in front of Bill, he's like, he shuts you down.
This is too much.
That's enough.
Yeah, okay, we get it. Yeah, wait, can I do one more line? No, thanks.
Well, guys, congratulations on the film. I loved it. Incredible work. It opens this Friday, right? People can check it out?
Yeah, VOD, and then it'll be in select cities around America, and, iTunes, Amazon, that kind of a deal. Yeah, and cable. Check it out, please.
Yeah, and there's cities. It's showing in a couple.
I don't have them all memorized. But Minneapolis is one of them. L.A. New York.
Is there a website that people can go to see the cities?
Oh man,
No,
Justin
we don't
Long
have
post
that.
it.
We don't have that.
I'll post it on my Instagram.
We'll go to Justin Long Instagram
Yeah.
to find out where to see Afterclass.
It's a low budget movie, guys.
Yeah. Just ask.
Give Dan and Justin a round of applause for being here.
Thank you,
Let's
guys.
hear it.
Thank you. Thanks for your question.